Kathy, thank you very much for agreeing to do this discussion with me on NDC. Let's jump straight in. Welcome to the chat. Can you just do a quick introduction about yourself and what your role is at Sabre?
So my role at Sabre, I am the vice president in product. I'm responsible for all of our air content sourcing. So obviously NDC sits within that realm. Been with the company for 33 years, so I've got a little bit of wear and tear and mileage on in this industry. So certainly, I think it's been a real opportunity to get to take that expertise and then apply it to something as exciting and innovative as NDC has been.
There's an increasing amount of activity around NDC as of late. I mean, it's not new.
Probably some of what we're seeing now, we would have actually seen probably a year and a half or 2 years ago, but for COVID. Obviously, COVID had a pretty big impact and slowed things down for a while. And so I think as the industry is waking back up and initiatives that are so kind of critical to propelling the industry forward are going to become much more front and center as we go into recovery. So I think that probably has to do with why we're seeing this kind of amplitude of the messaging. And then certainly you have some airlines that are making some pretty bold moves in this space. And I know we'll probably talk about that. That certainly has brought this front and center for a lot of people that maybe weren't spending quite as much time thinking about NDC in the last 12, 18 months.
Yeah, we'll certainly get to those questions, but that's very true. So how busy is NDC keeping you guys?
Holy moly, busy, busy, busy. I can tell you that it has certainly been a busy time for me personally and my team at Sabre. And it's really around just, we are working with an ever growing number of not just airlines, agencies, corporations, other technology providers. The ecosystem aspect of this initiative is so significant. So I can tell you, I personally, I love both the opportunity and the challenge to read these things. We at Sabre are continuing to invest materially in both NDC and offer order broadly, because certainly offer order based retailing is the framework on which NDC is built. And it's one of our top strategic initiatives. And so it's keeping us super busy. We have an extremely robust pipeline of airlines. We've launched 7 airlines already. Live production volumes are flowing. We are simultaneously working on about 7 additional airlines that will be launching in the very near future. American Airlines obviously being one of those, as we've talked about recently in the industry, along with Lufthansa Group and United Airlines, Finnair. So lots of concurrent activities happening. And then we have a pipeline of more than 30 airlines that we're actively engaged with. So I would say I don't think the volume is going to decrease in the coming months and years. It will probably potentially only increase as we continue to really scale and move forward.
What are your biggest challenges at Sabre with getting NDC then to work?
It's so important to talk about that the aspect of NDC that's often overlooked, which is that it is an ecosystem initiative. It's not just an airline initiative, although it was born on the kind of the backs of airlines. And if you don't address this kind of multi-constituent need in the way that you think about the technical approach to NDC, then it can't be successful. So that's one of the things I'd say at Sabre that we just took really seriously, and I do believe we have been a leading advocate on this particular topic. Whereas we've got to bring all the parties to the table, and we have to think in solution and collaborate in a way that drives value for everyone. We could probably do an entire session just on this, but given we have a finite amount of time today, I'm going to hone in on maybe what I'd say are the 4 biggest challenges, and that we are really working diligently to address. First and foremost, it's around the differences in airline implementations. It puts a huge drag on the pace of implementations. So, the thing every time I get in any type of an interview with NDC is like, oh, why is this taking so long? This has probably been one of the reasons that aren't obvious to those who don't live and breathe this every day. And this isn't just a question of one version to the next. I wish it were that simple. But even how differently an individual airline using the same schema has implemented their NDC flows on top of these schemas has made it really difficult for companies like Sabre, where our value proposition is bringing buyers and suppliers of travel and creating this travel marketplace. And we have to do that in a way that normalizes content so that we can get to as seamless of a workflow as possible. But I For me, I think this is where, frankly, IATA should have taken a much stronger role in actually driving industry standards. They are an industry standards body. And so I think this is one of the things where you hear the term NDC as an industry standard. That word standard could not be further from the truth. And there just should not have been the ability to have so much flexibility and interpretation in the standards, because that is really what makes it challenging. As you go airline to airline, you have to really understand all these nuances and normalize and work to the extent that you can. So I think I'd say difference in airline implementations is a big challenge. The second one that I think is really important for the environment of the ecosystem to understand is around agency workflow implications. Again, not something that people just initially understand. But even with everything that we're doing at Sabre to provide this normalized workflow for agencies across both, again, remember, this isn't just an NDC story. There's a whole lot of content out there that will continue to flow through traditional technology for years and years to come. So as we think about how you normalize all that, there are pretty significant workflow changes that an agency is going to have to adopt. There's this whole change management aspect that an agency has to initiate and evaluate and understand to be able to operationalize NDC. If you think about it, integrating NDC content isn't like integrate it and turn it on and the magic happens. There are different workflows. Like a great example is a shopping-led workflow. The vast majority of agencies utilizing aggregation solutions like the GDS or use a schedule-led flow. That means I start with the flights that I want, then I worry about the price. NDC doesn't even have a schedule-led workflow contemplated inside of these standards. Everything is a shopping-led workflow. So you have to start from that. So agencies have to then think about, so from an agent workflow, what do I have to do differently to be able to even engage and consume this NDC content? And then you also have things that maybe not at the industry standard level, where they'll take the same flow but implement it differently. So exchange is an example. There are airlines that have a one-step process in the pricing flow of exchanges, and there are airlines that have a two-step pricing flow for exchanges. And agencies have to be able to absorb that. And so it puts a pretty significant impact on the efficiency of the flow. And so again, we continue to do everything we can to make that as normalized as possible. But it is not insignificant to the work that agencies will have to do to be able, again, to operationalize. And then maybe the last two that I'd touch on would be around performance and value. I think these are two that are also overlooked at times. When I talk about performance, I'm actually talking about it from kind of two perspectives. One is just literal performance, like technical performance. The amount of time that we're seeing with response times associated to NDC shopping responses is unbearable. Just to give you some context, in the Sabre GDS today, most shopping responses are sub-second. Some might be 1.5 second based on more complex itineraries or more complex numbers of passengers, but 2 seconds and you're essentially done. We're seeing response times north of 8 seconds from many, many airlines. That's insane. And again, the problem with that is as you have that type of delay, your ability to convert becomes pretty impaired, because there's just not the willingness and desire to have that type of a wait. And then the other aspect of performance, I call it operational performance. I don't know if that's the right term or not, but it's the type of data and the type of responses that are coming back that agencies are so dependent upon, whether or not we're getting the right detail in price breakdowns and taxes that agencies need for downline processes. So both of those are areas that we are going to need to have ongoing focus on for us to really get to a broadly adopted solution. And the last one I'll end on, and I know this is a lot, but you can tell I'm pretty passionate about this particular question, is really around value. There's this expression, I don't know if you've heard about it, is the juice worth the squeeze? And that's what I think we're dealing with right now, quite frankly, is that there's a whole lot of work required by everyone to make NDC operational, and the value, or maybe think of it as the ROI for that work for the agency channel specifically, it's still not super clear. The starting point for the majority of airlines has been, I'm going to send my existing content down new pipes, which I get it. You got to start somewhere, and that makes a ton of sense. But as an agency, that's not very compelling. I get all this stuff today and it works beautifully across end to end, all the different flows that I have. And so now it's like, I've got to do a lot of work to be able to get to the same stuff. So I think the quicker that we can see true value add content available to agencies in the NDC channel beyond lowest fare class or surcharge free content, like that's not sexy. We want to see, and we do have airlines that are beginning to do this, new types of bundles, even defining content differently, content and capabilities, things like same day exchanges, like a lot of these things that weren't necessarily available. As these value add components become more real, then you're going to have agencies a lot more willing to do the work to be able to bring this content in. That motivation is there. And then I think we're really going to see NDC start taking off in a pretty meaningful way.
Yeah, there's a lot there to take on board. And so it's not just a matter of slapping an API in front of things. There's a ton of stuff here
That's
to
right.
to keep in mind, and you've got a lot to deal with there. And thank you for explaining that so well. Aggregators out there are saying, man, if only the GDSs will eventually accept NDC. Is it a case of them having the luxury of starting on a blank sheet and only having to deal with that?
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, that just makes my head explode. I have been working at this for many years. This is not a question of whether the GDSs are adopting NDC.
Mm.
We have a robust marketplace that processes billions of transactions a day. So you can't even think about a world where a new entrant aggregator that doesn't have that marketplace, that doesn't have that responsibility to their existing customer base to ensure a solution that's going to provide the value and capabilities and efficiency and the opportunities to airlines to be able to distribute their content in a very robust marketplace. It's apples and onions, not even apples and oranges.
Yes.
And so I think that, obviously new entrants bring great innovation into the space. And I think it's great to see the way different organizations have been able to innovate, and, more power to them. But I don't think you can even talk about a GDS implementation or integration of NDC in the same context, because
Yes.
it is just in a different stratosphere.
Yeah. It's not schedule driven, but it's price driven. How suitable do you think is NDC content then for the expectations of a corporate buyer?
I'm probably going to answer your question a little bit differently, because I don't think this is a question about how suitable is NDC content.
Okay.
I think you have to say, how suitable is the NDC implementation for corporate buyers? Because at the core of this, the content's critical. I mean, if you listen to the voice of the corporate buyers, they want access to cool new stuff. They want easier access to the beyond fair benefits that they negotiate in their corporate programs that are really hard to get to. And NDC is a critical enabler of getting that kind of content expansion. So I think NDC as a technology source for bringing cool new stuff is essential for all segments, including TMCs. The implementation of NDC is where we have the challenges. So right this moment, we have a working group, and we have about 5 airlines that have all raised their hand to say, I am willing to help and be the voice into the IATA forums to talk about a schedule-led approach. So I do think we're going to see progress here. It's not going to be fast enough, and everyone's going to be really frustrated. But at least those conversations are happening. And now with having, as long as you have an airlines that are advocating it and will kind of sponsor that through the process, I think we have a pretty good shot at getting something to be realized in a future schema version that will allow the schedule-led approach. Because again, I think it was a huge miss in the early kind of incarnation of NDC, and we're going to see that continue to be a pain point in corporate adoption until we can get there.
And do you think there's enough representation at IATA for the entire ecosystem, or is it still too airline heavy?
So I kind of banged on IATA a moment ago. I will give them props that over the last probably 3 to 4 years, I think they recognize that in the early days of NDC, it was completely tone deaf to anyone other than an airline. Then IATA realized, again, this is an ecosystem, a highly interconnected ecosystem with lots of members of the value chain. And if we don't recognize those, this is not going to succeed. So they started putting programs in place, the Implementers Forum, the TMAG, the GTEC, to where they're bringing the voices of corporate buyers, TMCs. So I do think we're in a really good place now. I think we've got the right conversations happening now. We have the right forums. That's really now, I think, informing a lot of the work that we are all doing in this space.
That's great to hear. Just moving on a bit, we mentioned this earlier on, but let's talk about American Airlines. They're putting you guys under pressure to deliver by the 1st of April. Well, that's what the stories would like us to believe.
Again, I think the American Airlines announcement, we probably would have seen it sooner, but for COVID. They have been really focused on NDC for a really long time. They've made a ton of investments. They actually have some, interesting content that's uniquely available in their NDC APIs. So I get that we want to see progress. Fortunately, Sabre and American Airlines, we've been working together on NDC for several years. In fact, we did a production pilot with 7 agencies earlier this year. I mean, we have the capabilities in place, ready to launch. There are a few additional capabilities that American Airlines is wanting us to have for the launch. So that's kind of why we've anchored around this April date. But we already have the content available, integrated, ready to go. And starts with being the NDC contents available via our APIs, which that matters because any technology provider, corporate booking tools, for example, OTAs that use our APIs can source content. And additionally, we've integrated NDC content into Get There, our own corporate booking tool. And that all that has already happened. So I say that to say, I think we're in a really strong position for the April launch of NDC. And so, I can't speak on behalf of other companies, but, we are working very closely with American to ensure that this launch in April is successful and that we're able to get their NDC content into the marketplace.
I've got 2 questions left for you, Kathy. One relates to the slight elephant in the room, which is the commercial model.
Personally, I think probably one of the greatest travesties of the whole NDC initiative is the fact that the term NDC has been used in different contexts to drive different outcomes, both technical and commercial. And I think that this conflation has really been a major contributor to the pace at which NDC has progressed because people were just confused on what NDC is. So I think, let's just take a minute to be super clear. NDC is not a commercial model. It is a technical standard designed to change the underlying technology of how airlines distribute their content that enables greater retailing and personalization, enabling things like dynamic pricing, continuous price points, new content. It's literally, NDC is just moving from EDIFACT to an XML-based solution, like 2G to 5G in the cell world. It's just technology. But I think that said, to your point, I don't want to be ignorant to not recognize that there is certainly commercial evolution in the distribution landscape that's underway. We see it all around us. But my point's always been, I think that commercial evolution happens and it would be happening whether NDC was a thing or not. Putting them together makes it really hard to advance them independently, which I think has been one of our challenges. The other part of that is there is not a one-size-fits-all approach to this. There are lots of permutations of different models by different airlines in different regions. But I will tell you that what the focus has to be moving forward, Ariane, is around value creation and value contribution. If you'll pivot that conversation to value creation and value contribution across the value chain, commercials will work themselves out. Like, let's get that value component really clear and recognize the value that different players play along the life cycle and journey of travel. And then let's all kind of work together to figure out, so what does that mean in the context of commercial evolution?
I really like that you're separating the commercial from the technology, and it should be a separate thing. Absolutely. We started this conversation by saying, it's not new, NDC, it's been 10 years. Why are we, and I assume you guys are, but why are we all still excited about NDC?
Absolutely. I think we should still be excited because at the end of the day, if you zoom out, let's just get past the noise of kind of everything that we're going through at this point in time. The 2 things at their most simplest level is around flexibility and content symmetry. For airlines to be able to sell their products across channels, being able to get the same types of products available in any channel that they want to make them available, agencies and travelers, most importantly, being able to have access to the content that they value in the channel that they value, that is like critical. And we have seen ongoing content fragmentation, the things that you could do in an airline direct channel that you couldn't do in the indirect channel. So I think that those 2 things are so important. And if you think about it, as a traveler, when we get to that state where we need to be, NDC is about supporting access to more relevant travel choices. I hate to use, it's a very overused analogy, but if you think about your buying experience in Amazon, the way they know who you are, they recognize your previous purchase behaviors, they can make recommendations that you value. Having a retailing framework to enable that type of merchandising is so powerful for a traveler to be able to get to the value of product that they want to be able to obtain. And if you think about travel sellers, it's all about content. You will hear, if you ever sit down and talk to any agency of any sort, content is king. And so that is the lifeblood of the travel industry. And so knowing that we are establishing a technology regime that enables a broader access to new types of content and doing it faster, I think that is so powerful if you think about the way that the world of air content is going to continue to evolve. And then for airlines, I mean, again, the flexibility to be able to do new and different, cool new things in much faster ways, seamlessly across channels. I think there's a ton of us for all of us to be really excited about. We just have to make sure that in all of our excitement, don't forget the brass tacks. Don't forget, we've got to establish this foundation right. We have to make sure, as Sabre is doing, continue to focus on core capabilities that powers the agencies and corporations in ways that they find valuable, that enables airlines to distribute content in ways they find valuable. But I think there's a ton to be excited about.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Have a great day.